I understand that you were with the Royals just a moment ago at the National War Memorial. This is where they laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Describe what that moment was like.
Well, this is really quite something, because normally when you have, openings of Parliament, you go to Parliament and you just leave Parliament. Whereas this time they walked from the Senate up to the cenotaph to honor the war dead. And of course the King mentioned the sacrifices that Canada's militaries have made in the past. He referenced the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. So I think the symbolism of his last engagement in Canada, being at the cenotaph, was huge. It said everything. It said, we have sacrificed before, and we are prepared, of course, to do it again if we need to. And when he laid the wreath and the Queen laid the flowers on the tomb of the unknown soldier, I mean, you could have heard a pin drop. There were thousands in the crowds around there, and it was just complete, utter silence. And I think it was the solemnity of that moment. He very much is, on this trip, King of Canada. I mean, we talk about it. I talk about it. I always say to everyone, he's not the British King. He's the King of Canada. But I think really for this trip, everyone understood that. And especially at that moment, he had the Order of Canada insignia around his neck. He had all his medals, including his Canadian Forces Long Service Medal. And it was just one of those moments that you just wanted to just hold on to. And I think they did too, because King Charles III and Queen Camilla took a long time actually saying goodbye to everyone. They took a long time, waving to the crowd, talking to people. And then what was fascinating was, as only a monarch can do, as he's driving away, his windows are down. He's waving to everyone in a way that the security conscious politicians often don't do.
Can you shed some light on how the monarchy currently is being received? And you have to wonder how that has changed, especially in light of the international events, the Canada-US trade war, and the renewed sense of national unity that some people discuss. How have you viewed this change and that sentiment across this country?
Exactly. I mean, the monarchy in Canada is always kind of a victim of benign neglect. It's there. We never really think about it. Let's face it, our monarch does not live in Canada. That does not contribute to a knowledge of the crown. But it's always kind of, been that way, muddling along. And then suddenly in the last few months, it was that realization that having a monarch, having a monarchy, having a crown is a good thing. And seeing the benefits that can impart on Canada as we face, let's face it, this existential threat from the man who lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And really the fact that he is the embodiment of Canada. So having him come over for this trip is I think, significant. I think what everyone took away, whether you agree with the monarchy or not, you took away with the fact that for him to come, more than 5,000 kilometers for essentially 24 hours sends a signal. It sends a signal that he is the King of Canada, and now and in the future.
One would have to assume this is obviously welcome news, not just for the new Prime Minister Mark Carney, his government, and for many Canadians, and a renewed sense of I guess, connection with the monarchy, but also incredibly important for Buckingham Palace and those, not just for the monarchy, but also the UK government, as so much of the discussion is focused on renewed partnerships and the fact that the UK is no longer part of the European Union. You have to wonder if it's as important for them as well. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think it is. I mean, the fact that Canada is really, as the throne speech said, as you referenced, looking out for new partnerships. I mean, we're we're looking out across the Atlantic to Britain, to Europe. That's the sort of thing that the fact that we already have such close ties with Britain will help. I think some of in the UK government were a little apprehensive of what might happen because, of course, they have their own fraught relationship, as do all of the King's 15 realms with Donald Trump. Everyone has to deal with Donald Trump. And I think they were a little worried that they didn't want, the Canadian government in the throne speech putting words that could come back in the King's mouth that would come back to haunt the British government. I didn't see anything in there that would. And of course, the UK government has invited the president for a state visit, and the king, in his role as the British king, will be hosting. He's used to this sort of thing, but it can be a little bewildering for, I think, some others.
And the optics must certainly help. And I touched on this with David. The warm weather in May, at least it's not November in Ottawa, or December certainly for the beginning of the legislative session. But certainly the crowds on the streets of Ottawa and the warm welcome that he is receiving, certainly good optics from a public relations perspective, not just for the government of Canada, but for Buckingham Palace as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this entire 24-hour visit. It was geared around one thing, which is Canada's sovereignty, and so everything from the arrival to the huge crowds of the community event at Lansdowne Park, then to Rideau Hall, then the Senate up. Everything was geared around that. And I mean, yes, the weather completely cooperated. A little bit of rain at Rideau Hall, I will say, but nothing serious. And the fact that there was just simply one singular focus, it wasn't, a 5-day or a 6-day or a 12-day visit, I think really helped it. Because everyone knew what to expect from this, and everyone knew that every event was going to inform that central theme, which is promoting Canada's sovereignty. And I think in a way that the fact that it was so short is what made it so successful. And I think it certainly has been successful. If you look at the world press, and all the world press are here. There were Australians beside me. There were people from the United States. This is getting a lot of attention around the world. And the central theme of the king coming home to Canada was what was resonating.
Patricia, it is so great to talk to you again. Thank you so much. And as I speak to you, we see King Charles III and Queen Camilla boarding the Canadian Armed Forces plane, waving to the crowd. They spent a little more than 24 hours in the nation's capital. The first visit for the monarchs in Ottawa. Well, the first visit as monarchs, if you will, the official visit. King Charles' 20th visit to Canada. Short but incredibly significant, not just from a political but from a public relations perspective. Patricia, thank you so much, as always. That was our royal expert, Patricia Treble. And thank you for joining us for King Charles in Canada, our special coverage.